Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a great privilege to rise in this House once again and ask the government a question to which it has not been all that forthright in answering, which is what precisely are its plans when it comes to its long-standing desire to censor what Canadians see, say, and do on the Internet. Now, not that long ago in this House, Mr. Speaker, I asked the Minister of Canadian Identity what he was planning to do. Actually, I asked him if he would cop up to the fact that he was the minister tasked with online censorship, given that there seemed to be some doubt and actually some examples of Liberal ministers clamoring over precisely who got to take up that honour. But I need to give a bit of a history lesson for those who haven't been following this. The Liberals have, for the last two parliaments, tried to bring in draconian online censorship bills. They tried it in the 43rd Parliament and failed. They tried it in the 44th Parliament and failed. And now both the Justice Minister and the Minister for Canadian Identity have said this still remains a very live priority. When it comes to online censorship, the Liberals are saying, if at first you don't succeed, try again. What Canadians are saying is, take the loss and sit down. Canadians do not want this government to regulate online speech. Canadians do not trust this government to do it. We are already seeing with Bill C-9, the Liberals reduce the threshold for what constitutes hate speech. We've seen in this bill them water down a definition that has been working in criminal law in Canada. C-63 in the most recent Parliament, the Online Harms Act, went far beyond this. C-63 actually would empower the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal to prosecute Canadians for saying things that offended people online. The Liberals were bringing back a much maligned, and I'm grateful to say, formerly repealed section of the Canadian Human Rights Act, Section 13. That's what's at issue when we talk about so-called online harms. And I have no doubt that the parliamentary secretary to the minister tonight will talk about all of the examples of why this is so necessary. But the reality is the condemnation of the Liberal government's online harms proposals has come from left and right. It's come from civil liberties groups on the left and right. It's come from Canadian luminaries such as Margaret Atwood, who I do not believe would ever align herself with those of us on this side of the bench, because Canadian free speech advocates, Canadian artists, Canadian scholars, journalists all realize the importance of being able to speak your mind without the government weaponizing a definition of hate to censor what Canadians do. And the reason I bring this up now is because when I asked the minister the first time around for this, he started talking about Google. He started talking about Google trying to give money to pacify the government when it comes to local journalism initiatives. But the minister was mixing up the many online censorship bills the Liberal government has put forward. And I realize there have been a lot of them. It's tough to keep on top of them. I wasn't asking him about Bill C-11, which forced the government to mandate YouTube algorithms and streaming. I wasn't talking about Bill C-18, which the government used and ultimately pulled local news and all journalism off the Facebook and Instagram platforms in Canada. I was talking specifically about online harms, a term that the government uses to cloak what it's doing in something that, to someone who doesn't pay attention to these issues, may make them feel good, like it's a good thing, but in reality has no other objective but to reduce what is acceptable and permissible in the bounds of debate and the bounds of free society. So I'm asking this government once and for all, will it commit to taking its so-called online harm censorship bill out of the playbook and not censor what Canadians say and do online?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for Canadian to the Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to thank my colleague for his question. I would like to reassure Canadians that they are right to trust our Liberal government. We will protect their rights. Bill C-11 modernized the Broadcasting Act to ensure that digital platforms, which play such an important role in how Canadians stream music and audiovisual content, contribute fairly to support Canadian content. It did not allow the government to control YouTube algorithms. In fact, our government asked the CRTC not to impose regulations on online broadcasters that would impact the content of social media creators, including podcasters. My colleague does not seem to understand the link between C11 and C18, so I will explain it. C11 also requires the CRTC to regulate the broadcasting system in a way that is compatible with freedom of expression.
Expression that motivates Bill C-18's requirement that tech giants who act as gatekeepers of online news must negotiate fairly with the new businesses that inform Canadians. News outlets play a vital role in maintaining a healthy democracy. The Online News Act was passed in December 2023 to support Canada's news sector and ensure that Canadians have access to reliable news and journalism. It aims to ensure that dominant platforms like Google and Facebook compensate new organizations when their intent is made available on their services.
Google actively participated in the regulatory process and agreed to pay an annual financial contribution of $100 million indexed to inflation to support the Canadian information ecosystem. So far, over $48 million have been provided to 231 news providers, including local and independent news outlets.
The members have engaged with these platforms. They are still not accountable and transparent on how harmful content is managed, and that's the point. We know that social media platforms are being used to threaten, intimidate, bully, and harass people. They're being used to promote racist, anti-Semitic, Islamophobic, misogynist, and homophobic views that target communities, put people's safety at risk, and undermines Canada's social cohesion and our democracy. Social media platforms are also used by predators and offenders to exploit children. Conservatives like to pretend that any attempt at addressing online harms is an affront to freedom, yet we know for a fact that 4 in 10 Canadians are exposed to online hate on a monthly or weekly basis. Conservative politicians need to stop hiding behind false outrage and join us in ensuring that Canadians feel safe in their community. Our Liberal government campaigned on a clear commitment to introduce legislation to protect children from horrific crimes, including online sexploitation and extortion, and give law enforcement and prosecutors the tools to stop these crimes and brings predators to justice, and Canadians elect us to deliver on it.
Our Department of Justice has just introduced the Combating Hate Act, a piece of legislation which would fight against rising hate by strengthening penalties for hate crimes, intimidation, and obstruction. We will never compromise Canadians' abilities to express themselves online.
Honourable Member for Elgin St. Thomas, London South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Parliamentary Secretary for what I'm assuming was intended to be a response to the question. The Conservatives have zero objection to cracking down hard on online child sexual exploitation, and I hope the government will support the member's bill from the member for Calgary Signal Hill taking aim at that. But the Liberal government in Bill C-36 and C-63 lumped that in with its Orwellian anti-free speech censorship laws to do exactly what the Parliamentary Secretary is doing right now, which is to say that if you do not trust the government to weaponize the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal with a lower, murky threshold for so-called hate speech, you're therefore okay with child sexual exploitation, which we are not. So will the Parliamentary Secretary clear things up right now and say that Section 13 of the Canadian Human Rights Act, under the so-called online harms guise, will not be coming back and censoring Canadian speech online?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Identity and Culture. Mr. Speaker, it is clear that our government would never censor Canadians because we respect the rights of Canadians. Bills C-11 and C-18 were designed to create a level playing field between major digital platforms on one hand and Canadian producers and distributors of news and online content, respectively. These bills do not tell Canadians what to consume, and they do not restrict Canadians' access to a wide variety of Canadian and international media. Currently, platforms are not responsible or transparent about how they manage harmful content, including content that does impact children seriously.
Freedom of expression and freedom of press, two essential pillars of our democracy. Our government doesn't censor. We protect, we defend freedom of expression, advocate and support Canadian media, and keep the children safe online. Thank you, Mr. President.